Hello Perception Trainers people, and welcome back to the latest video. And this video is going to be the start of Perception Trainers 2.0. So over the last year and a half, I've been busy in the mystery school writing the deep tissue cleansing program that has been a huge joy for me, and then working with them for self-love and all these things. And now I'm ready to share with you what I've been going through over the last year and a half, and what I have been discovering through working with all of these tools that I have shared with you on the channel, and doing my own self-love work. And I've come to some revelations about my life and my journey and my process that have really shown me the roots of my self-hate, and the roots of my self-sabotage, and the roots of my physical illnesses and my physical problems, and have shown me the intense fear and the intense resistance that comes up when we really get close to who and what we actually are, and what it means to live a life of truly accepting yourself, and how monumentally horrifying that is, based on our conditioning. So the reason that I feel that I am wanting to start to make these videos, this video in particular, and then all the videos that I'm going to be making coming forward, are for two reasons. Number one, I'm doing this as a declaration of my own journey, that I am coming out of my shame closet. And again, as I have been teaching this self-love, I've been teaching this self-growth, and everything that I have been, like I say, preaching to you, I have been practicing. And at the same time, I had just boatloads of self-hate, and boatloads of shame, and boatloads of just self-hate, and to the degree that I was not even aware of my own self-hate. It was such second nature to me. I was such a fish in water that my perception of myself and the parts of me that I thought were evil and bad, and even my perceptions of my scapegoats and my coping mechanisms and my self-sabotage, were all focused on that there was something wrong with me, and that I was broken and I was bad and I needed to heal myself. And I have finally come to understand that there was never anything wrong with me, that I have no reason to be ashamed of myself. And the second reason that I want to start making all of these videos that I'm going to come out with in the next several years, I'm sure, is because I know that I'm not alone, that what I have been through is not unique to me, and that we need some voices in the world right now who are standing up for the inner children in all of us who got destroyed by the culture of death that we live in, and someone who's there saying, talking about the realities of truly learning about yourself, truly learning to love yourself, truly learning to express yourself, and the scary, horrifying, thinking you're going to die nature of that. And someone to just be here to, again, I feel anyways, that it is time for us to stop scapegoating and shaming ourselves and our reactions to our lives as though we are wrong and bad and flawed for how we are reacting to our lives. So what I have come to understand over the last year and a half, that I know if you watch my health history video, you probably kind of assumed some of these things, that I was raised in a household by a mother that has a pretty severe personality disorder. And she's never been diagnosed, but I'm going to call it out as she definitely exhibits all of the signs of narcissism. And the way that my sister and I developed, and the neuroses and the self-sabotage and the coping mechanisms and the way that we thought about ourselves and the way that we thought about the world all match the diagnostic criteria for having been raised by a narcissistic parent. And it's very interesting because the thing that actually was the final validating, okay, it's not your fault. This isn't what's wrong. This isn't your fault. You're not, this isn't what's wrong with you, has been my body. And so, of course, you'll know that my body has been one of the main points of contention in my life, but she has saved my life. And everything that she has led me to do is the reason that I'm still alive, and the reason that I survived my childhood, and the reason that I'm surviving into my adulthood, getting better instead of worse. So what happened that finally kind of solidified this for me was a few months ago. I went to a naturopath because I've never shared this before because I understand, because I didn't really have an understanding yet of why everything was happening the way that it was. That when I was 14, I got my first menstrual cycle. And along with that, I developed a whole cluster of other symptoms that I now can put into context and understand what was happening to me. So my blood pressure went through the roof. My blood sugar levels were out of control, so my insulin was not quite right. I was swollen. I could gain and lose 10 pounds overnight from just water retention and swelling. I got cysts on my ovaries. I developed cysts on my ovaries. My immune system was shot. I had chronic digestive issues that were just getting worse and worse and worse. Big dark purple stretch marks that I got overnight. And eventually, so I got my first menstrual cycle at 14. All of these things developed. So I got the big purple stretch marks. I got the water retention. My immune system was shot. I literally sat on the couch for an entire year in grade 8, and with a chest infection I couldn't get rid of. My digestion did not work. I could not digest anything. I was eating a normal standard American diet, and just I was in debilitating pain once or twice a week, but also just all day long. Every day. It was just normal for me. I had been sick my whole life. I had chronic digestive issues my whole life. I didn't know what it felt like to not have bloating and swelling in my intestines. And I know that if I had been taken to the doctor properly at this time, I would have been diagnosed with colitis or Crohn's or something, because my colon was destroyed. And then like I say, I developed cysts on my ovaries. And then 1 year after getting my first cycle, my period stopped. And we started going to doctors, and we went to naturopaths, and we were like, why is this happening? And they were telling me that none of my female sex hormones and none of my male sex hormones were being produced. I wasn't producing any hormones except for cortisol. I had really, really, really high levels of cortisol and no female or male sex hormones. And so they were like trying to figure out if I had a pituitary tumor. They were looking at my ovaries. I did all these scans. I literally went to doctors and naturopaths and tried every natural and unnatural remedy that they can give you. I did bioidentical hormones. I did seed cycling. And this was way before diets. So this was my hair started falling out. My hair thinned out. I got big bags under my eyes. I got big puffy cheeks. I had, like I said, all these stretch marks and all this stuff. And they were looking at me, and they couldn't figure out why what was happening to me was happening to me. And like I say, this was before diets. So in and around this time, I started to augment my diet in the way that I started eating paleo. I started eating high protein, lots of fat. I had lots of calories. I was never restricting my calories. That was my first foray into diets, and my health continued to get worse. And my period never came back. And then over the years, I went to the doctor a couple of more times. But again, on my own, I started to just, like I say, the naturopaths and the doctors all just kind of were like, well, all your tests are normal. Your organs seem to be looking fine. We don't know why this is happening to you. And then by the time I was 22, I went to a doctor one more time, and I was just like, hey, I haven't had my cycle since I was 15. Can you take a look at me? They did a blood panel, and they were like, this just seems to be how your body is. We have no idea. And so I let that go, essentially, at that point. And what we need to understand is that I had already taken on, at that point, that whatever was going wrong with my health was my fault, and that I was the problem. And so I'm just going to fast forward a little bit. So essentially, 2 months ago, I went to the doctor, and they looked at my blood results, and they looked at my test results, and they were like, okay, look, all your organs are functioning great. Your liver's awesome. Your kidneys are awesome. You don't have any nutritional deficiencies. Everything seems to be fine, but your cortisol levels are through the roof, and you have no hormones. You don't have any of the male or female sex hormones. And they said, basically, this is a stress-induced menopause. You are in a state of stress-induced menopause. And this finally put into context the health journey that I've been on since I was 14. I literally have been in a stress-induced menopause since I was 15 years old. And that is a pretty serious thing to understand, that I did not get those years of your teens and your 20s where your body is meant to be producing your estrogen and progesterone and all these things and putting calcium into your bones and doing all this stuff. That didn't happen to me. I didn't get that. And so, and essentially what I had, now looking back when I was 14 and 15, was Cushing's disease. I had every symptom of, my body is in such a state of severe stress that it is no longer capable of producing the sex hormones, because this is how our hormones work. When our cortisol levels are so high, the body, it is competitively inhibitory to your sex hormones. Because of course that's survival, right? Like when you're in a state of stress, when your body perceives that you're in a state of stress, that's not a good time to be producing children. That's not a good time to be fertile. That's not that, where you're in survival mode. You're in fight or flight, and now we're understanding that there's an even deeper nervous system response. You're in freeze. And the reason this was happening to me, the reason I was in such a state of stress, the reason I was forced into this stress-induced menopause is because my mother was antagonistic to my survival. I was growing up in a household where I was the ultimate scapegoat. And I was so deeply unsafe and so deeply in a state of stress and survival that it literally aged me 50 years, if we want to look at it that way. And so over the last year and a half, I have been realizing and recognizing that my relationship with my mom was not good. And on the self-love journey that I had been on up until then, I had lots of anger towards her and lots of resentment and lots of feeling like something wasn't right. And there was pain, but I still didn't really understand what was going on, because my psychology was set up that if there was something wrong in our relationship, if there was something wrong in our household, if there was something that I was reacting to that was in any way causing anyone a disturbance, it was my fault. And this is very classic narcissism parenting, which basically states that because of the way the narcissist's brain works and their shame and their trauma, if something is wrong in a child that they are seeing as a reflection of themselves, the only two options there would be that there's something wrong with what I'm doing, me, the parent, and that means that I'm wrong and I'm bad and I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm stuck in shame and I'm stuck in fear and I'm stuck in all this stuff. So that would be completely devastating to me. As the parent with narcissism, to accept fault, to accept blame, to see that there's something going on that is your fault, that you can then do something about to fix and make better, is far too emotionally straining. The shame of that is too intense. So the only other option is to make it so that the child is at fault. And what we need to understand is that in my circumstance, in my situation, I was born reflecting back to my mother that what she was doing wasn't right. So I literally had colic from the time that I was born. I had digestive issues all the way through my childhood, and I had big emotional issues. I was sent to the guidance counselor in grade 1 because I was so stressed out. And I've come to understand a lot of things about the human nervous system and about why this sense that your mom doesn't love you, the sense that your mom doesn't approve of you, the sense that she is pulling away from you mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, even if she's meeting your physical needs, puts the physical body into a state of stress, into a state of survival stress. Because first of all, the physical body does not understand that mom can pull away from me mentally, emotionally, and spiritually and still feed me and still clothe me, and then I'm still going to have those needs met. But at the same time, humanity doesn't seem to understand that our need for self-expression, our need for safety and approval and an environment in which we can express ourselves, in which we can learn, in which we can grow, in which we can discover our reality through making messes and experimenting with things and trying things and learning about ourselves and asking questions and all of these things, is just as vital for our survival as humanity, as getting our physical, mental, and our physical needs met. And I feel like parents are now starting to understand this, that just a baby is not just a digestive system. A baby is not just, I fed it, I changed it, I clothed it, I burped it, it's fine now. Children, especially children, need stimulation. They need to be able to express themselves. They need to go through the periods of the terrible twos where they're learning that they're not the only person on the planet, and what interacting with other children is like, and learning empathy and learning all of these things. And we need to be allowed to play and to, like I say, play, experiment. We need to have a safe environment where we can interact with the unknown and have our adults teach us how to learn. So we need to be able to climb up onto something, get panicked that we don't know how to get down, and have mom and dad not rescue us, not save us, not shame us, not blame us, not yell at us, but show us, okay, you got up there, I'm here, I love you, can you climb down? And then that is empowering the child to develop autonomy, to develop understanding, to develop awareness of their environment, to learn how to use pain and pleasure to learn from reality. And when that is shut down, when that is stunted, we are stunted in our capacity to grow into actual adults. When we are not given the opportunity to learn from our environment, to play, to grow, to expand, to understand ourselves, we are physically, mentally, and emotionally being cut off from that which we need to survive as a human. We are not just a digestive system. In order to figure out how to meet our own physical needs as we grow, we need to learn how to interact with our environment. We need to learn all these things. So having a narcissistic mother who, in my household, the number one rule was don't take up space. Don't have needs. Don't ever make mom look bad. Don't be emotional. Don't express that there's anything wrong, because any expression that there's anything wrong either means mom is doing the wrong thing, and that is too devastating, that is too crushing for her in her mental state, and therefore it has to be that there's something wrong with you, and you as the child are the thing that's wrong. So being that I was an emotionally awake and aware child who was never able to shut down my body and never able to shut down my emotions, essentially for my entire childhood, I was expressing that I was in pain. I was expressing emotional pain, I was expressing mental pain, I was expressing physical pain. And this was being scapegoated and blamed on me for my entire life. So I learned very early on that when I was sick, it was my fault. I was causing mom an inconvenience, and that was gonna get love taken away from me. I learned very early on that when I cried and I was upset and I needed love and support and time and someone to help me understand these big emotions that I was experiencing as an incredibly empathic child who had no boundaries, I needed someone to help me work through that. But instead, it was told to me with my mother's words, you are the reason you are so upset. You are too needy. You are too emotional. You need too much. You need to learn how to take care of yourself. You need to learn to be acceptable at school so that your friends stop bullying you. It's your fault that your friends are bullying you. It's your fault that no one likes you. And this emotional expression that you're doing, this crying every night to me, your mother, is again really inconveniencing me. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be doing this. And you are making me feel bad. So this was my worldview, that my pain was my fault, my body sickness was my fault, it was an inconvenience to everyone around me, and that the purpose of my life, the only way that I got value and the only way that I got love and acceptance from my mom was to either be reflecting back to her that she was great or to be needing nothing. So providing something for her or completely out of the way. So I was an incredible overachiever. All through school, I was in every dance program. And I think what's more important here is that I learned from a very early age that my parents weren't going to be there for me. And as much as I cried out for that, and as much as I wanted that, I went to my mom over and over and over again for my emotional needs. Every single night, I would cry to her and tell her how much I was hurting and how much kids were mean to me and mean to each other, and I didn't understand why everything was so awful and why everyone was hurting so much. And every night she would blame me, and every night she would shame me, and every night it would be, you are causing me pain, you are making me feel bad. And then as I grew into a teenager and I started to develop these physical problems, again, the message was, you can't do this. You can't gain weight. You can't be ugly. You can't look like this. You can't do this to me. You need to fix whatever this is, because this is really making me look bad. And so that was drilled into my head from very, very beginnings. And like I say, I'm not going to be able to go into all the details in this video. All I'm going to be able to say is that I grew up indoctrinated that all of my pain was my fault, that everyone's pain around me was my fault, and any amount that I was not able to adjust to what was something that was wrong with me. So as I started to grow up, I started to develop ways in which I was trying to empower myself as a young child who doesn't have understanding, doesn't know what's going on, and doesn't have autonomy. I tried to start to give myself my own autonomy. So I started babysitting when I was 12 to put away money for myself, because there was something instinctually that I just knew my parents weren't going to do that for me. Because at the same time, my dad was so stressed out about money and stressed out about his retirement that he made it very clear that the amount of money my sister and I were costing was stressing him out. So again, fast forward to the time I'm 14, I'm diagnosed with ovarian cysts, my body explodes, am in so much pain. I'm so sick. I'm mentally and emotionally completely gone. I am so anxious. I'm so depressed. I literally sat on the couch for an entire year. Almost didn't pass grade 8 because I almost didn't attend school enough to pass. I was completely done. And in that moment, there was just a moment I was sitting on my couch and I just knew that if I didn't save myself, I wasn't going to make it. That I knew very, very deep in my core that if I didn't start to take care of myself, that no one was coming. I think that was one of the first times I really recognized and realized somewhere inside myself, like I didn't cognitively understand, but I in my core understood. Mom wasn't coming. She wasn't going to make this better. I was really sick and I needed help and no one was coming. So if I wasn't going to figure it out, it wasn't going to get figured out. And of course, this is all tied in with the learning trauma and the nervous system response that my mom's love and approval equals survival, because that's how our nervous systems work. And if you want, I'm going to make more videos on this in the future. I'm not going to go into all of it here, but just really understanding that the ways in which I started to develop my coping mechanisms. So putting all of my, so here's the thing, right? The thing that my mom wanted from me was for me to be smaller. And metaphorically, spiritually, physically, I was taking up too much space. Mentally and emotionally, I could not be okay with our household, and she could not make it that was something that she was doing wrong. It had to be something wrong with me. So she wanted me to be smaller. She wanted my emotions to be smaller. She wanted my needs to be smaller. And really understanding too now, looking back, we weren't allowed to play. We weren't allowed to make messes. We weren't allowed to have needs. And even starting in junior high, she was a stay-at-home mom who didn't have to work, who didn't have to do anything else. Her only responsibility was to take care of us. And she started saying, okay, you're old enough now. I'm not going to make you lunches anymore. You can take care of your own lunch. And I'm not going to... So my sister and I were completely devoted to doing perfectly in school. We were straight A students, both of us, always. We were extracurricular activities. We were dance. We were voice lessons. We were performance. I was babysitting every single weekend. I got my babysitter license when I was 12 and literally babysat and saved my own money from the time I was 12 years old. We were doing all this stuff, and she just was continually rolling back what she was willing to provide for us. And any amount of work that she had to do, like making dinners for us and having our friends over and all this stuff, we weren't allowed to do any of these things. And it was made very clear that this was taking up time that she shouldn't have to be spending on us. She would tell us during summers, like, it's not my job to entertain you. Go figure out something else. But don't make a mess. You're not allowed to paint. You're not allowed to create. You're not allowed to draw. You need to be in your room, not making a mess. You need to be outside, not making a mess. And be smaller. And then again, with my emotional outbursts and my emotional, like, the world is totally fucked up and everything that we're doing is totally against human nature, which is what I'm realizing now is what I was reacting to. She was like, nope, that's you. You're messed up. You need to be normal. You're not normal, and that is completely not okay. And you need to figure out how to fix this. So I was into self-help and self-change from my entire childhood. So like I say, by the time I got to 14, I realized it was all on me. I was either going to figure myself out, I was going to save myself, or I was going to die. So I started cooking for myself. And like I say, I went on the paleo diet. I was doing everything that everyone says you're supposed to do to get your period back. I was eating lots of calories. I was eating fat and all of these things. And at the same time, trying to lose weight. All of this, like I had gained like 20 or 30 pounds like overnight in this time in between getting my period and getting the cyst on my ovaries. So the Cushing's disease that I definitely had was in full effect. I had, like I say, insulin issues. I was exhausted. I was chronically exhausted. I stopped sleeping through the night. I think when I was in grade 7, I would go to bed at 10 and lay there until 2, just worrying and trying to figure out what I needed to do and what I needed to be the next day to not be a burden to my mom, because I had been traumatized 5 minutes before by trying to tell her how overwhelmed I was and having her tell me that that was making her feel bad and that was bad for her. And so I started again to change my diet, to start cooking for myself. When I was 16, I got a job at the health food store so that I could start to afford my own food, because I realized Dad was on a budget and the food that I needed was more than that budget required. And so I had to pay for my own food. So I started, like I said, I got a job at the health food store because then I could get a discount on the food that I needed. So I was in high school, I was a straight A student, I was in all these extracurricular activities. I was now completely managing my own diet, my own food. I was still sick, I was still exhausted, stressed out of my mind because of my household, and now because of all of this responsibility that was on me. And my mom would sabotage me. She would literally, she stopped even cooking dinners. So now I'm in grade 10, grade 11, grade 12, and I'm out of the house from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and I have to come home and meal plan for myself and put all my food together for the next day. And I'm trying to be healthy and I'm trying to do my eating perfect. And I'm exercising and I'm doing all these things. I'm trying to make myself smaller. And my world just became about fixing myself, because everything I believed, everything was wrong with me. And so then by the time I was 18, of course, I developed anorexia, and I still had so much shame around that up until very recently, that there was just something wrong with me then. Why did I do that? And there is so much shame in our culture around girls who are starving themselves, or boys who are starving, people who are starving themselves, and as though this is some sort of attack on society, as though we're doing this to shame people who are not thin, or that there's some nefarious reason that we're doing this. And this is just so not the case. I was trying to shrink myself in the only way I knew how, because I couldn't make my emotions go away. I couldn't make my personality smaller. I couldn't make my needs less. The only thing that I was capable of doing was distracting myself by becoming someone who provided for everyone else's needs. So this is when I became the most codependent person that I think has ever existed. I truly took on the mantle that my mom was giving me, that all of her pain, all of her struggle, all of her suffering, every amount of time in the day where she wasn't able to just read her book or watch the TV show she wanted to be, or just spend her time the way that she wanted to be spending her time, was my fault. And everything that was going wrong in our household was because I couldn't be okay, was because I was sick, was because I was needy, was because I was emotional, and everything would have been fine if it wasn't for me. And that was my belief system about myself. And so if I was going to get love and approval, it was going to come from providing something or getting out of the way. And so I learned how to provide stuff. I became my mom's counselor very early on. So starting to turn around from me going to her with my emotional needs to her coming to me with her emotional needs, and me looking to help her and to support her in the things that she was complaining about. And this also always got me in trouble, because in my own life, I was looking to see that, like, okay, if I change my behavior, I start to get better results in my life. If I change my diet, I can actually improve my health. And of course, I never got my period back. I was still very, very stressed. My digestive issues were very chronic, and I wasn't healing everything perfectly, but I was feeling better. I was getting better. And so I was saying, look, if you're upset about this or that in your life, why don't you try doing this? And she would say, you're making me feel bad about myself. You're blaming me. What she really wanted me to say was that everything that is happening in her life isn't her fault. It's someone else's fault. And she's just an innocent princess victim who deserves no blame for this. And she's allowed to have her needs, and everyone should just be conforming to that. And any amount that she wasn't getting what she wanted, any amount that she was uncomfortable, any amount that she was being made to have to do something for someone else that she didn't want to do, any amount that she wasn't being praised, she took that as an affront to her. And like I say, I started to try to help her. I started to try to be there for her. And that got me even more trouble and even more trouble. And then moving on in my life, I knew that I couldn't ask my parents for money for school. I knew that I couldn't ask them for money for anything. So I became hyper just independent. We moved to Vancouver. I worked 2 jobs and was putting myself through school because I think my dad put away something like $4,000 for me and Sam to go to higher education because, again, he needed his retirement. And there was basically nothing left over after what he was saving for his retirement, so we didn't have an education fund. My sister got to go to school for about a year, and that was made very clear to me that was very stressful for him. And so I just didn't go to university because I didn't want to go into debt because I didn't know how I would pay for it. And so I paid for my own education through working 2 jobs and paying for myself and doing all these things while my physical body was continuing to fall apart, and all of these things were happening, and I was doing everything that I possibly could to save myself. And then that's when we went to Thailand, and I had that revelation of like, okay, no, I'm going to have to get on my body's side. And that was the straw that essentially broke the camel's back that led me to all of this. So from 2012 to 2018, I had been loving myself and loving my body and taking away my scapegoats from myself. So no longer letting myself starve myself, no longer letting myself act on all of these self-sabotaging behaviors. But I was still a workaholic and finding all of my value in what I was providing. So I would literally work from morning till night, constantly needing to be productive. I took on caring for my sister, who we now know has complex PTSD from my parents' abuse of her. And I was literally, for the last 3 years, I have been the primary caregiver and support for a person who was traumatized by the person who traumatized me. So I've been working on that. I also realized I completely took on all of the responsibility of our life in regards to me and my partner. I did everything for us. And I was his scapegoat as well. Just any amount that he wasn't happy, any amount of life that he didn't feel good in, it was my fault. And so I've been doing this work, and I've been working slowly to get to see that so much of this trauma and so much of what I thought was wrong with me wasn't wrong with me. But it wasn't until I was able to finally say, okay, I think it wasn't my fault. I think my illness wasn't my fault. I think the fact that I couldn't do normal life and make my mom look good wasn't my fault. Maybe there was something wrong with the environment. Maybe all these things that I have shame about my personality and about my journey of my scapegoats and my coping mechanisms, so starving myself and then even just being obsessed with my body and thinking about calories and being neurotic and workaholism and all of these things that I did that I knew weren't good. They were painful. But I couldn't understand why I had such a compulsion to do them. And then still having very deep levels of anxiety. And finally coming to this understanding that my upbringing wasn't normal, and that the way that I was shamed and the way that I was raised to believe that everything was my fault and everyone's pain is my responsibility, and that the only good thing about me is what I'm producing for other people or how small I can make myself, isn't reality. And then on top of that, seeing that who I really am and what I really want to do and what is actually valuable to me and what is required for me to grow into a truly capable adult is all of the things that I was trained from day one made me evil and wrong and bad because they made my mom upset. And so this last year and a half, I have been taking my power back in ways that I've never done before, in that we put up a boundary with my mom. I didn't cut her out of my life. We said to her, look, I'm not going to be your counselor anymore. I'm not going to be your scapegoat anymore. You are going to have to take responsibility for your own pain. If you're upset, that's fine. If you come to me, you want to talk about it, that's fine. But you don't get to tell me that it's my fault that you feel bad, or that the advice I'm going to give you, which is empowering yourself advice, makes you feel bad about yourself. And she pulled out. So I put up a boundary with my mom where I basically said, I'm not going to let you scapegoat onto me anymore. I'm not going to be your punching bag anymore. I'm not going to take responsibility for your pain anymore. And she stopped having a relationship with me. She stopped talking to me. She sent me an apology letter where she said, I want you to understand that everything that I've ever done was from love. And if I hurt you, you need to understand that it was because I was just overwhelmed, that I didn't know what else to do. She's never admitted to any of the things that my main point was, I'm not going to hold a grudge against you for the past. It's okay that you did what you did, in the sense that I understand why you did what you did. You were traumatized. You didn't know. You were overwhelmed. Fine, okay, sure. But you need to admit to these things that were painful, and admit to these things that were abusive. Because moving forward, if you can't identify your abusive behavior, you're just going to keep doing it. And she essentially just said back to me, no, I didn't abuse you. And if I did, it wasn't my fault. And I said, okay, look, this isn't going to work. You're just going to keep abusing me if you can't admit to what your abusive behavior is. And she stopped talking to me. And then I have been putting up boundaries with my husband. And in this last year, really seeing how I completely took on my sister's trauma as being something that I had to fix, that I had to heal her. I had to create this perfect environment where I was completely supportive of her. So I have essentially been reparenting my sister. And that is absolutely true. And it has been the most stressful thing that I've ever been through. And because her PTSD is so bad. And like I say, we didn't really have all the pieces of the puzzle until we were able to say, like, no, okay, this is a real thing. And it's a textbook thing. So, and that's the other thing that I want to say too, is just that we've been looking into the literature that exists now for recovering from having a narcissistic parent. And I have been doing all of the tools. Everything that has been recommended, everything that has been said in these books, I figured out on my own before I even knew what was happening to me. And this is why I say this work works. So even though the way that I was raised was completely normal to me, it was causing me pain, and learning to follow my pain, and learning to listen to my scapegoats, and learning to listen to my self-sabotage, and learning to listen to my coping mechanisms, and not make them an enemy. And say, okay, no, I'm doing this for a reason. Why am I doing this? Maybe it's not that there's something wrong with me. Maybe there was something wrong with my environment. And that happened just slowly, because again, to admit that there was something wrong with how my mom treated me, to admit that there was something wrong with how she's thinking and what she's feeling, what she's doing, means that I'm admitting to myself that it doesn't matter who I become, she's never going to love me. It doesn't matter what I do. I'm letting go of making it my fault. And that is way more horrifying, because that means the hope that if it's my fault, I can fix myself and then she will love me is dead. And then it means I now have to go out and be all of these things that in my nervous system, so programmed into my survival mechanism body, to be is to lose my life, because it made my mom pull away from me. And in my childhood, I was dependent upon her. So to have her take love away from me meant I was going to die. And now, as this is what the traumatized child in all of us is. It's these parts of ourselves that were rejected, were shamed, were abandoned, that didn't get to grow and express in our childhoods because it made our parents pull away from us. That in the immediate environment, the only way to survive that was to change and shut ourselves off so that our parents would keep meeting our needs. But now as adults, as we shut ourselves down, as we shut down who and what we are, as we cope, as we self-sabotage, as we do all these things, we are destroying ourselves. We are destroying our capacity to understand how life really works, to learn, to grow, and to become truly autonomous, and to be beings who can learn from reality and not need teachers and guides and all these things. So like for all of these years, people have asked me like, how do you know what you know? Why do you know this? Who did you read this from? There's no way you just learned this from reality. Yes, I did. I just learned it from listening to my own pain. I was just never willing to end with an answer that didn't actually lead to my freedom, that didn't actually lead to my feeling good. And I knew the difference between doing something that made me feel safe, because it's familiar to shut myself down, right? So to obsess about my body, even though I'm not allowed to diet, I'm not allowed to cut my calories, I'm not allowed to do over exercise, I took all that away from myself. But I'm swollen and I'm just gonna worry about it. That was a way that I was shutting myself down, because as I'm busy worrying about my body, I'm not making this video where I'm talking about how my mom abused me. I'm not being my real self. I'm shaming myself into a cage so that I would never be what she didn't want me to be, which is telling the truth, admitting these things that don't make her look good, being someone who is not organized, not structured, not this perfect adult that doesn't take any space, but being a person with needs, being a person with desires, being a person who is creative and can be messy and can be all of these things. And seeing that literally to express these things causes me to feel like I'm going to die, because it's programmed into my nervous system that she's going to pull away, she's my source, if she pulls away, I die. And I'm having to reparent myself that no, I can be rejected. I can be all these things that she didn't want me to be, even though, like I say, my nervous system is fighting me on every level to protect me. My scapegoats, my self-sabotage, all the things that I did to survive my childhood were there for a reason. I developed them for a reason. They were protecting me from the absolutely antagonistic environment I was living in. But I'm not there anymore. And I'm an adult now who has to make for myself a life that's going to work for me. So the point of this video is I'm coming out of my shame closet. My scapegoats, my coping mechanisms, my addictions, all the things that I did to cope with the reality that was fucked up were not my fault. It was never me that was fucked up. It was my environment that was fucked up. And now that I'm an adult, I need to learn, and I am learning, to take my power back, to put up my boundaries, to be myself even though it feels like I'm going to die. And now I want to start making these videos to support you in that, because I know I am not the only one who was shamed and blamed and rejected for who I am. You don't have to have had a narcissistic parent to have been shamed and blamed and abused for your true personality. And I am here to be a voice for all the people who can't make normal life work, for all the people who are ashamed of yourselves, that you're the scapegoats of society. It's not your fault. There's nothing wrong with you. You are an adult who can learn to meet your own needs. And we're going to do this together. So I hope this just is a little intro. I was abused, narcissistic parent. I have so much information for how to heal from this stuff, and I'm going to be sharing it with you coming forward. But now you know. This is why my hair is thin. This is why my body is the way that it is. I was in stress. And I'm coming out of it, and I'm healing, and I'm doing better than I've ever done before. And I want to share with you how I'm doing it. And it is so scary, and it is so hard. But it's worth it, and it's possible. True healing is possible, but it's going to mean facing a lot of stuff. So let's be honest together. I'm just going to keep sharing. The next couple of videos, I'm going to share more about my personal journey, and then we're going to get into this, because together we can do this. You're not alone. I love you. I see you. I'll see you in the next video.